So we're going to now go to the quilt. So those two people who volunteered to turn the quilt around, I hope you didn't forget, and you can do that now. Thank you so much. Tasia. I was actually more familiar with the Kearney quilt. And even though I met all of these people, all of these relatives, I met every single one, I just, for some reason, I just became, it's a different time, different era. I had a different life going on at that time. And so I just became enthralled with the Kearney quilt. It required a lot of work, a lot of attention, and I had a lot of help. That committee was at least 12 people, and with the Kearney quilt, each branch, each person, each entity made its own block, no exception. Every one of the Kearney quilt blocks was made by that branch. So, and I didn't contribute anything except the organization and the control of how they were arranged on the quilt. And we just had like a superb quilter for both quilts. She did both quilts. She's incredible. And I'm not a salesperson. I hate the idea of just talking about something for the sake of, but she's passionate about these quilts. And when I go over everything, you'll see what I mean. Okay. I'm going to try to do this without error. And I have a couple of kids in the house. I have a couple of nieces and nephews who have agreed to come and pick up the slack if I mess up. So I'll remember that. And okay, and at the end, we're going to let everybody come around and stand, not too close, but to take a picture up close, to get up close and personal and take a picture. But meanwhile, we're going to go through the quilt. And so I'm going to ask everybody to be very quiet and listen. Pay attention as if you're in a classroom and you're being graded for your attention. Okay, first you have Thomas Clayton Kearney and Cynthia Davis Kearney. We're not going to talk about the credits until the end, but Thomas Clayton and Cynthia Davis Kearney, now again, they were in the 1800s, but they were not 1843. Thomas Clayton, I believe 1872, and again, he's coming right behind the Emancipation. He's very close to that. So there is a difference, but he knows what slavery is all about. He's had that feeling, he's had that interaction, that experience, but we don't know because we didn't get to meet him. He passed when my dad was young. So Thomas Clayton, this is a good picture of Cynthia Davis Kearney, my grandmother. That's a good picture of her because it shows her braids, it shows her sitting in her element, it shows that she's very comfortable, and we're just happy to be able to have that. You will have a copy of my niece's video so that you can see a little more and adjust the size of it, and that way you can see it and understand it a little better. I think I'll get my pointer just in case. I might have to walk back to my notes, but let's try to go through it without walking back first. So this is This is the picture of Thomas Clayton and Cynthia Davis Kearney, my grandparents, on my dad's side. And there's writing on there that I've already gone to about a third of my time, so I won't elaborate right now. But then we go to the next block, which is the explanation that goes with Thomas Clayton Kearney. And I'm going to read that later. But right now, this tells who they were, who they are, and just how important family is to them. And the author of that particular block basically is saying that they don't believe that Thomas Clayton and Cynthia Davis had any idea of what they were producing and what they could expect in this world later. And so we're happy with that. And I'll talk more about Thomas Clayton's picture. Okay, the firstborn with the Kearney quilt, this is Virgie, and Virgie was the firstborn. Now what I am disappointed with myself is that I didn't have a better picture of Virgie, because that picture shows that Virgie actually she's at home. She's in her community, and there are plants, some of the plants around are actually the plants that she planted and managed. She was a gardener, and she was recognized for that, and people were so happy with that whole concept. I only went to her house once, and so I really got to meet her. And the good thing about this quilt, as I pointed out earlier, is that I met everybody on the quilt except Evivius and Thomas Clayton, my grandfather. My grandmother actually spent probably, I remember I was real little, but she spent some time with us. She lived with us for a very short while that I remember. She could have stayed longer. I know my brother James is here, he would remember. But yeah, so I really got to know her. And then we went to visit Uncle Johnny quite a bit. And that was like a really, really nice thing to have happen. So then we go to going past Virgie. And it shows each one of the blocks point out very carefully what was important to Virgie and her husband Mose. I'm sorry, not Mose, Talton. Okay, and that says Talton and Mose. And next is Sally, Aunt Sally. Sally, our regional office was Chicago, so whenever I went there, I tried to visit Aunt Sally. And I spent a lot of time with them. One of the nicest people you could ever know. She was just a gem. So that's a picture that's the next block. She was the second born of the 9 children. So that's Sally, that's Aunt Sally and her husband. And it tells you, she was married 46 years, and they have 6 children, 4 grandchildren, and 16 great-grandchildren. Her motto, and I'm just going to read hers because it's short: be good, humble, and pray. And that's one of the things that she believed in. Okay, quilt block number 5. Quilt block number 5, and we're going to give credits later. That is Uncle Johnny Yarbrough Kearney, and everyone in my family knows Uncle Johnny, because he visited our home a lot. He would come by and say hello, and just, we were all anxious to see him. The older ones, I don't know if he died, I believe, in the 80s. I don't remember the exact date, but I've got his daughter here who can help me with that if I need it. But we were pleased with all of them, but that's one of the ones that we remember. And it spells out what Uncle Johnny stands for, or what he meant. It spells out, I'm so happy that I was able to get a copy of the flag, because he He fought in World War I. He was a career military person. He had 3 stripes. He had a pin. Thank you. And thank you also to all of the military people who are here. We are very, very happy and pleased that you have done your job with the military and that you've defended us, and we are very happy to mention that. Okay. Okay, so, and Uncle Johnny's 3 children are listed here, are shown here below a picture of the flag. Next we go to Evivius Kearney, and Evivius lived a shorter life. She had 1 child, and her 1 child died at around 2 years old, something like that. And Evivius she died at about 21, it looks like about 21 years. She is the other one. She's the only sibling that I didn't get to meet. Then we go to Uncle Bubba, Lawrence Kearney. And Lawrence Kearney's family is spelled out, and this is an excellent picture of the community that Uncle Bubba stayed in. And we remember, those of us who went to visit him a lot, we remember it because he would always welcome us to have a seat, and he would talk about the proximity between his children and our family. And it was just a wonder to be in his home. And so that's him. And we'll talk a little more about the art and the work that Esau put into that a little later when we start doing credits. But next we go to Uncle Harry, and Harry's story. Harry and his wife are pictured here. Harry, again, was born in 1904, so he's right outside the 1800s. But he's 1904, and Uncle Harry actually lived to be 98 years old. And I have a picture of him. And Uncle Harry was with us up until I think one of our last reunions, about, I don't remember what year, but we strolled him into a home, 4 of the siblings with me, and we took a picture of it. It was just wonderful because he was 98 years old, and we kept thinking it would be, since he was enjoying life so much, we wanted him to continue to stay with us. But you know, that it was a miracle and a wonder. All of these siblings lived long lives. They all did, and that's really beautiful. So I got to know him well enough, and for him to be so much older and interacted with him. So the next is Thomas James and Ethel Curry Kearney. Thank you guys for showing appreciation to one of the quilt blocks. And of course, you try not to be biased, but my parents are, of course, extremely important. And so, yeah, this is a long story, and we're not going to tell it, the whole thing right now, because that is, and then we have 2 additional blocks with the Kearneys that we'll get closer pictures of that. But the Kearney family is represented by 2, there are 2 different pictures here. When you come around to do a closer look, you'll see what I mean. And then the narrative below tells a lot about what this picture represents and what it's all about. I think they're all amazing. I did 40 years pretty much of fairness, so I try not to be biased. So I try real hard. It's difficult sometimes. But we have 2 blocks that really document a lot about the Kearney, Thomas James and Ethel Kearney's children. And then we go to the next block, which is, that is a Kearney ancestral connection. And that is it's a piece of artwork that I think is absolutely magnificent. This young lady did this block by hand. She hand carved it, she thought it out with just one piece of instruction, and that is that you are doing a rendition of an African picture that connects who we are today to our ancestry. We're ancestors of people from Africa. So that's what she did, and I'm really pleased with it. And that's, it's Amber J. King. And the next block is Uncle Willie. And Uncle Willie is next to the last. Uncle Willie, actually, I can't read it from here, but he had, I believe, 7 children and a large number of grandchildren and great-grandchildren. We spent a lot of time at his home. We really did. We did. I visited him frequently, and those of us who went to visit the relatives who were in Pine Bluff, we always would see the same ones, pretty much. Virgie, Sally was there for a while, and then Uncle Johnny and Uncle Willie. And then the next block next to Uncle Willie is a showing of one of Uncle Willie's children, Louise Kearney Williams, and her children who are grandchildren and great-grandchildren of Uncle Willie. And then next we have Uncle Sam Kearney. Uncle Sam had one child, and his one child is now passed away, but he and his wife were married over 40 years. But the longest marriage of all of these 9 siblings was Uncle Willie. Uncle Willie and his wife were married 59 years. Thank you. And even those who've been married that long, or even over 30 years, they'll say marriage is tough. That's not an easy task. It's not necessarily an easy task to stay with anyone that long. Even though you love your kids, you love each other, there are those obstacles that sort of become obstacles. And so we're proud of those who are hanging in there and making it worthwhile, especially where there are children and grandchildren and there's love. There's nothing better out there, frankly, in most of the cases. Anyway, so let's go to the last block. Excuse me, you guys, try to pay attention. The last block is basically credits, and I will need to get a copy of that to read the credits. Give me 1 second. Okay, the credits are the design and narrative credits of the Kearney Ancestral Quilt. Concept and coordination, Jan Kearney King, 2020 and 2021. Appreciation is extended to those who worked on the following quilt blocks: Thomas Clayton Kearney and Cynthia Kearney, Jack, Jan, and Joyce. Jack did the basic narrative, almost all of the historical and research work on that block. All of it actually was done by Jack. And then I did some editing, but beyond that, we're talking about Jack. Excuse me, you guys, can you wait until we finish? And then, okay, next we have The next credit is Virgie Minor. And Virgie, that's all me, so no one else I can list for credit on that one. Sally, I did I used the photos and these design for Sally, and the wording, the last line was provided by Cookie and her kids and family, which I really, really appreciate. And the next block actually have the author of the pictures and basically how she wanted it. That's Mazarine Yarbrough Kearney. Mazarine, would you stand, please? Thank you. So Mazarine is responsible for providing her dad's flag and the photographs. And that's a picture of Uncle Johnny in his uniform as a military career person in World War I. And many of us weren't born. Most of us weren't born then. But anyway, we're proud of it. And then we have Evivius Kearney. Evivius Kearney was done start to finish by April Hawley. That's my sister Jamie's daughter. April did a start to finish fantastic job. She wouldn't take any suggestions. She wanted to do it start to finish. She created the design and she sent me the wording, which I won't read because I've got 8 of those that I'm going to send out to you that people sent who couldn't make it. She did this design, she said, because it represented the virtuosity of Evivius, and she wanted that to be an extremely important part of what she was doing. She designed it and embroidered every single stitch of that flower. And she wanted to do it that way. She wouldn't have it any other way, and I was so happy and proud. And so that's who did that one. The next quilt block was done by Esau, and I know he had some feed-in from Alice Sylvester also contributed to that quilt block. They gave him information, but he did the artwork and put it together and sent it to me, and I'm very happy with that. I did the Harry Branch quilt block about the wording and the picture, and I'm pretty pleased with that. And again, I'm going to read some information about Harry, about all of them actually. So next we go to Thomas James Kearney and Ethel Curry Kearney. That design concept was done by Joyce Kearney Richardson, and the art was done by Reverend Kevin Young, my nephew, who is Jamie Young's son. Kevin did the complete artwork. Joyce gave him what she wanted to see in words, and he turned it into art. I provided the 2 photos that you see suspended, and I had those photos suspended when I sent them to Reverend Kevin Young, because my thought was that Mother and Dad were already gone to heaven, and that maybe if they're suspended, you could see the difference between them looking real and whole and suspended in air, and the 2 of them down below looking like artistic representations of angels. That was in my head, but his artwork is reading what he wanted to see, and so that's what we'll do. But Joyce, in that picture, as I said, it's Joyce's concept for the quilt art and Reverend Young's quilt block in terms of the art. And then we've got the 2 pages of information regarding those that couple's children. That's all about their children. And so we won't need to talk about any more credits on that. We go then to Willie. That was provided. Actually, I provided the photograph and did the organization, and Louise provided the names and information. So she and I worked together on that particular quilt block, and Louise Kearney Williams. And she did also the second quilt block, which identifies some of his grandchildren and great-grandchildren. And next we have Sam. Sam had one child, and I did the Sam block, by the way. And I talked about, there's detail on it that you'll see when you take a complete picture of the quilt. But I did the Sam block completely. So I had probably 4 or 5 blocks where there was assistance or complete outside job. Now I'm going to, before I finish, I'm going to talk about the last thing I want to talk about in particular that I think is crucial, and I'm sure I missed some things because I had hoped that we could do the PowerPoint of the Curries and I wouldn't have to try to remember. But let me, Sylvester, did you want to say a word about your block after I finish? Okay, let me go through this quickly. The quilter, if I don't know if we handed out the last thing, if you got a copy of the Kearney Ancestral Quilt, which identifies the quilter as well as a couple of things that she talks about on it. And one of the things that she talks about is the materials that she used. If you look at the top of it, it's on the back of the quilt, and I'm sure Catherine will eventually get a copy, a picture of it. But that talks about my appreciation for the quilter and gives her name. Next, I talk about, or the quilter talks about, now this is important. The quilter says at the bottom of her statement, this is what she says about the quilt. She says, materials used in this artwork include 100% African jacquard batiks created in Ghana, Africa, West Africa. There are crystal beads, crystal seed beads, and 2 natural buttons. Now, she went through the trouble of identifying these things and making them a part of this quilt. They're actually attached to the quilt, and she's identifying what and when and why. And then she says the red, and then at the bottom she says the black button with red thread symbolizes one God and his love, grace, mercy, and protection. And let me tell you where that particular block is attached. And please pay attention. Thomas Clayton Kearney. I didn't even know that she had attached these things until later. So she and I had no conversation for me to know which quilt block she would choose and why. But it's just really a blessing to know she went through the trouble to read into this quilt all of the love and understanding and appreciation that she found there. So in this quilt block, in the first quilt block with Thomas Clayton, there's a black button with red thread that symbolizes everything that I just spelled out. God and his love, grace, mercy, and protection. And she chose that couple to add the block, add that particular button independently. Now let's go to the next, the red button. The red button ties this family to our Lord and Savior and the blood he shed for us. That button she attached to Amber J. King, which I still haven't even discussed it with her. I had no insight, no reasoning, no understanding until I actually looked at this quilt later. So I can't tell you why she chose to do this. But I'm blessed, I'm thankful, and I really am happy. The crystal beads sewn on 3 different blocks, and I will give you the list of the blocks, The first set of crystal beads are on Aunt Sally. They're on right on the corner of Aunt Sally's quilt. The next set of crystal beads are on Uncle Willie's quilt, on the second page of Uncle Willie's quilt blocks, and the last crystal beads are on Uncle Bubba's, Uncle Lawrence Kearney. So those are the things that the quilter chose to do on her own, and I'm happy, really, really happy and pleased that she did this, and I am extremely happy that she was able to get through this quilt and do such a fantastic job. And the back of the quilt, again, she used her own special fabric, all African fabric. And if you did see the back of it, I just think it's a wonderful job, and I'm sure that you'll want to take a closer picture. So now, in my opinion, and this, I'm part of the group, I'm not the host, but I would suggest that those who want to come around, sort of probably in a line or something, and take a closer picture, but please, whatever you do, try not to touch the quilt at all. Do not touch the quilt, because it was promised to the museum in the shape that they have, that is photo that we sent to them. So, oh, and I think that there was one other block that I missed, and that is, sorry, Thomas Clayton, my grandfather, Thomas Clayton Kearney. So that's not an original picture of Thomas Clayton Kearney. That is a rendition that Reverend Kevin Young did for me in 2006, because I didn't have a picture of him, and I wanted a picture of him. So I contacted Kevin. I knew he had been a budding artist since he was very little. And of course I was around when he was born, but I'm just saying, I knew he could do it. So that's what he did. And what he did is Kevin used two of the siblings, like my dad and uncles, to put the pictures together to come up with what he wanted. He put together what he wanted to see and what he believed would be a good representation of our grandfather. And that's what you have here. That's the picture that you have here. And I think it looks a lot like all of those men. So that's my presentation. I can't think of anything else. And I'm going to give Sylvester, Mazarine, and anyone else in the audience who has direct information about any of the quilt blocks to talk about that, their respective quilt blocks. Sylvester?
Email this to me. I'm the youngest of 12 children of Lawrence and Marietta Kearney. I am honored and filled with humility to take on this task this afternoon. There are three symbols on the picture that you will see in the quilt, which is the basic foundation of how and what my parents incorporated in each one of their children's lives. They are the church, which is the anchor you will see on the picture, the quilt picture. Number two, family, parents photo in each child's name. The school, which you will see that my brother Esau Kearney, who is an author now also, he took some pictures, pieces of pictures that he received from my brother Jerry, and the picture that you see on the quilt, that is the original Gontrell High School in England, Arkansas, that we all attended. Also, in your, she said, in your own words, talk about 1 and 3. Well, just to close up, like I said, you know, the main thing is the anchor that represent, as Kearney is, you know, we are anchored in the Lord. We are a church-going family, my immediate sisters and brothers. And again, I am pleased to represent my entire family, Reverend Lawrence and Marietta Kearney. God bless you.